Hey guys, Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today I have a really nice budget knife. This is the Ruike P105-Q, and I had a few of you guys who were viewers asking me about different models from Ruike knives and sort of saying, what's the story here? Are they any good? Blah, blah, blah. You know, the usual type of questions people ask when they're unfamiliar with a company, and I didn't know that much about them myself. So I reached out to Ruike Knives Canada, and they got back to me pretty promptly, and were definitely interested in sending me out some knives to check out and share with you guys. And so that's how this review came about. This particular one is just the one that I've carried kind of the most and been able to play with the most initially. So over the next little while, I'll try to get some reviews out of the other knives that they sent as well. In the meantime, though, if you want to kind of check out their stock and what they're doing, go ahead and look in the description box below, and I will have a link to their Facebook page and their website. Now, I don't know if they've got any new stuff coming up for 2017, but I can promise you that by the time we get to the next review, I will have talked to them about that and asked them if there's any new exciting stuff that they want me to mention in those videos. Anyway, now that you kind of know where this knife came from and some of the history on it, I do want to qualify this with one thing, and that is, in this case, I was able to get some knives that you guys were interested in, specifically based on your requests. But just so you know, that's not something that's always going to work. So I don't want to be inundated with messages asking me about this knife, that knife, and the other. I try to pay attention to those, and if I have an opportunity to get my hands on a knife that a number of people have asked about, I will take it. But it just doesn't always work out. Anyway, one other thing by way of introduction, and that is, or I guess two other things, and that is to point out that this is a partnership with Phoenix Flashlight. So I guess they're kind of sister companies, or maybe they're divisions of the same company. Not sure exactly how that whole thing works. But I can say that they are not a division or in any way associated with Real Steel Knives, and a number of you specifically asked me about that. And there may be some similarity here. I think the biggest similarity is that they're offering some pretty high level of quality, or offering a pretty high level of quality for a fairly budget-friendly price. And that is something to be appreciated. And I think that's primarily where the comparison comes in with Real Steel Knives, because they're doing a similar thing. And of course, using the 14C28N steel, which is a great steel. And so it's nice to see both of those companies offering that steel at a good price point. Let's go ahead and start off with size and weight on this particular knife. So this knife is 8 3/8 inches overall. So a nice size. The blade is 3 5/8, which is, you know, a little more than the 3.5 inch that some people prefer, but I like a bigger blade anyway, and that does give you lots of workable edge. So I do like the size on this overall. The handle is 4 3/4. In fact, it's just a little bit more than 4 3/4, but not really, you know, not even a 32nd. So it's kind of just a hair over. And the weight on this is a little hefty for its size at 5.15 ounces. And that is despite the fact that it actually does have milled liners. You can probably see that in there now. A little bit heavy for its size. Having carried this though quite a bit, I can tell you that it carries pretty nicely. And any knife around 5 ounces, you know, I'm not going to complain about that. That's a totally doable weight for me. Now, the blade on this is a full flat ground 14C28N satin finished blade in a spear point. And so I've got it, you know, it's all kind of belly, and notice the angle on the top and bottom are very, very similar. The bottom blade does extend a little further than sort of this swedge on the top. I really like the blade shape, and I like the sort of the orientation of the knife. It's got a natural slant to it, so if you're kind of cutting on a surface, you can get at that surface pretty nicely with the way the blade has that relationship to the handle. And I will say I really appreciate that aspect of it. Of course, the steel on this 14C28N is definitely my favorite budget steel. Not quite, it's not going to perform as well as D2, but you're not usually going to see D2 offered quite at the same price point. But 14C28N is going to be quite a bit better than than, you know, the AUS-8s or the 8CR13 or 440Cs or things like that that you're often seeing at this price point. So really good steel, nice thin edge, really utility blade shape. So all of those things make this a really nice knife to work with. And I will say there's a lot of versatility here, with maybe one exception. It is a pretty thin point. And this is something we're used to seeing with knives that are like this, you know, a lot of Spydercos and different things like that. The point is pretty fine. So probably a good chance if you're working with this and drop it on, you know, the concrete sidewalk, there's a good chance you'll break that tip off. That said, you know, for, I don't know, probably, you know, $30 to $50 that this costs, it's not going to be the end of the world if you do break the tip off. It's not like you broke a $500 knife or something. Anyway, for me, this blade has been really, really good. It's held an edge really nicely. It does cut really well. That full flat grind makes it move pretty easily through materials. And the original stock thickness is not super, super thick. It's not quite 1/8 of an inch thick. And that means you're going to get some pretty nice slicing ability out of that blade. Not that I do a lot of food prep with my EDC, but for food prep type tasks, this knife is really going to shine. And along with that, any kind of slicey task, you know, whether you're cutting cardboard up or opening packages or even skinning an animal or carving wood, because of the thinness on that blade, it's going to move through a material pretty nicely. Let's see here. What else do we want to talk about? Lockup and deployment. Now, this is one of the things that, one of the things that seems to be pretty common about these is they're on bearings, and they're fairly smooth. From time to time, as I'm closing this, you can feel the rolling just a little bit. Nothing major, and the action on it overall, not just for the price point, but the action in general is pretty good. Now, the detent, I could ask for a slightly stronger detent on this. It's one of those knives you have to be just a little bit intentional about, and if you know, I mean, it doesn't take a lot of getting used to, but let's see if I can, well, all right, well, I'm not going to be able to demonstrate the knife not opening when I want it to, which is essentially what we want to see. But it is a very smooth action, really nice feeling. Of course, ball bearings do tend to achieve that. So yeah, no big complaints about the smoothness or the deployment. The lock is a liner lock, as you can see there. And it does have a bit of jimping, and it's not sharp jimping, so it's just kind of enough. And that's really appreciated. Sometimes companies go a little overboard on that, but this one, not so much. So this is a pretty comfortable knife to utilize. No major issues with, you know, play up and down or side to side. That's nice and solid. And again, that's pretty expected from a company like this, and pretty expected in a knife that's designed to be this way. Okay, one of the advantages bearings definitely give you is that you can squeeze that blade down pretty hard and still get a really nice action and not too much friction because of those bearings. So yeah, lockup and deployment, very good, very solid knife. One thing I will point out, and I often point this out because it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine, notice there's no relief cut, and I definitely prefer that. And notice that there's a bit of a cutout here in the G10 to allow a little bit of movement on that liner lock. So just a couple little things there that are sort of done right. Now, so that's lockup and deployment, and nothing big to complain about there, guys. Okay, this is, it's not the most amazing action I've ever felt in my life, but remember the price point here is pretty affordable, and it is quite good considering. Let's see here. Now, what about the handle? Well, the handle is this black and blue layered G10. I think this is the only color option out there right now. I could be wrong on that, but this is a knife I would expect to see in a few different colors. Just seems like a fairly obvious thing to offer some options in, and it does look very, very attractive. It is comfortable in hand, and I'm going to see if you can see this, but all of the places where you can see the layers here, it's because they've cut into the G10, and so they've cut in places that make perfect sense. So as your finger wraps around the front there's a cutout there. There's a cutout here in the front for for the front fingers here to kind of fit into. So it really is molded nicely to the hand, and that's definitely something to appreciate. And that's how the layers come through. Now, one thing I will say is the G10 on this is pretty thick. And if there was one thing that I would say about this that could be improved on the handle, the biggest thing is just the thickness of this handle. It's a really thick handle, especially for the thinness of the blade and the overall construction. If that was toned down, you know, if you took, you know, a 1/16 of an inch off either side, this knife would be nice and slim, and it would be a little more comfortable in pocket, and just would seem to make sense a little bit more. You know, this is not what I would consider a majorly overbuilt knife, but the handle is pretty thick. I'll show you this view again when we get to some comparisons. Lanyard hole is, there you go, is nice and big. You can easily get 550 cord through there. And the pocket clip is, I don't know what to think about the pocket clip. I think on some of their models, this clip makes perfect sense. On this particular model, it works, don't get me wrong. It's a very nice, easily functioning deep carry clip. Goes in and out of pocket one-handed with no problems whatsoever. Aesthetically, I think I would have liked to see something a little more toned down, especially where there's two different blues here. Not sure how I feel about that particular feature, but on the other hand, I've got to say it does work really well. So those two things kind of balance one another out. It is Torx bit construction, so no big issue if you ever needed to take it down or adjust the pivot or anything like that. Centering is fairly good. I would say it favors the lock side just a little, but hardly noticeable. And again, that's not something that I get too bent out of shape about, but I know some people might. What do we got for comparisons to this knife? Well, obviously it begs a little bit of comparison to real steel, and I do have the H6 Elegance here. And there's a couple things here that I would point to as features that I would like to see the Ruike borrow. Okay, number one is the thinness on this knife. This knife is definitely a little leaner in pocket than this one, so that adds a little extra weight to it, as well as makes it a little bulkier in pocket. Also, the clip is just fairly slim and, you know, task oriented here. It's not trying to do anything special other than keep the knife in your pocket. This one, it's kind of a bit of an accoutrement. It's designed to kind of have a look to it, which I appreciate. But I could actually appreciate it more if it was just toned down a notch or two. But yeah, very, very similar. Now, one thing I will say is the Ruike knives are coming in at a very, very aggressive price point. So even with the ball bearings, this knife is a little cheaper than this one, but they're definitely in the same ballpark, okay? The other thing I would say is a bit of an advantage of the Ruike knife is there's nothing impeding, you know, your cutting ability here at the back of the knife like the thumb stud has the potential to do on the real steel. What else have we got? Let's bring in a Gonzo really quick. This is of course an extremely budget option, but the blade shapes kind of reminded me of one another. That's why I brought this one in. Of course, the Gonzo knives, you know, the steel is going to be, I don't know, mediocre. And this one from time to time, well, right now it's solid as a rock, but it does sometimes have a little bit of up and down blade play. Pretty common with these knives. But again, you know, just a budget-friendly Chinese offering that I wanted to share. Now, probably the knife that I would say compares to this the best in terms of value and performance would be the Rat 1 in D2 steel. The Rat 1 in AUS 8, I would say, no, the steel here is a big enough upgrade that they're not that comparable. I mean, they're still comparable. They're still budget-friendly liner locks. But with the D2 steel, this is going to be a little nicer than the Ruike, but certainly, again, in that ballpark. And there are a number of other knives, but the reality is that a lot of the world is filled with, you know, $40 to $50 folders that are mediocre, okay? And this is gonna beat out a lot of those. You know, there's not too much coming from Kershaw or CRKT or Spyderco or any of those sort of main brands that we think of that is gonna really offer you the same level of quality, the same level of materials for the same price point as this. You're going to have to compromise a little bit on some of those. And that's something that some of these Chinese companies are really, really doing well. And by the way, I say Chinese companies, but the reality is I'm comparing them to other overseas made knives, right? Like, you know, I'm not comparing them to the USA made Kershaws or the USA made Spydercos. We're talking about overseas produced knives in general. Okay, so overall thoughts. This is a really, really nice budget option, okay? It's comfortable in hand, it's well constructed. The blade steel is really well done, or I mean the blade shape is really well done. And forgive that phone call, I'm gonna ignore it for a minute. The blade steel is very, very nice. 14C28N is something I really enjoy. And so for this price point, yeah, this is a great knife. And you know, there's really no issues in terms of you know, value or quality at all. And so yeah, if you look at this knife and you go, hey, that's a really cool knife, I would not hesitate at all. And even if you're just a budget folder guy and you like to check out some stuff that is very wallet friendly, if you will, I think this is a great option for you. So hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know about your thoughts, if there's other rake models that you would like to check out. And by the way, let me point out that the pronunciation there, I did have to get some clarification on that. So if you watched the initial video, I can't remember how I pronounced it, sort of Ruike or something, but it is rake with a bit of an H sound at the end. Hope you enjoyed the video. Pretty cool knife here, and we will talk to you soon.